Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Lakrishia Cook, but you can call me Dr. Lala. Welcome back to another episode of the Revolve podcast, where grief and loss are a journey and not a final destination. And so today we're going to talk about what it looks like to navigate anxiety and restlessness in transition. Yes, we're going to talk about anxiety today. We're going to talk about restlessness today because there's a lot of times as believers, it's not something that we talk about a whole lot. So let's talk about it because transitions, whether they're expected or unexpected, often activate anxiety and restlessness. They do. And these are not signs that you're somehow having a spiritual failure or that you're emotionally weak. It means neither of those things. These are normal human reactions to change. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what it looks like and why it gets intense sometimes and how we can use grounding tools and faith and therapy to help support us through it. Because our goal is to normalize the experience, right? And we want to equip listeners with practical ways that we can regulate our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. So let's start with naming a core truth about anxiety and transition. So what are they? You're not broken. You're not crazy. You are fully human and you are God's beloved. Anxiety is not a character flaw. It's not. And I just want you to hold that for just a moment. Anxiety is not a character flaw. It's not a spiritual indictment. It's not evidence that you lack faith. Right. Let's sit with that for just a minute. Because how many people believe that if you're anxious, that somehow that means that you don't trust God? So many people believe that it means that your faith is lacking in some way. And none of that is true. None of it. Anxiety is a natural and human response when we are facing uncertainty, loss, and change. Because can we just be honest with ourselves? Who likes change? Sometimes change is scary. But it's important that we learn to call it what it is. Because when we can call it what it is and we can name this truth, that helps to reduce shame and it helps us to open the door so that you can heal. Because we don't want anything blocking our door to healing, right? And shame does that. And so then, if anxiety is a human feeling, why do so many people misunderstand it? Why is it so hard to actually acknowledge it and face it? To call it what it is? And so some common misunderstandings that some people have when they're anxious is that they should be able to handle it alone. I shouldn't feel this way if I trust God. Asking for help means I'm weak. And for some, they believe that asking for help, or they think that they say to themselves, my anxiety means something is wrong with me. Right? But the truth is, when we have these types of misunderstandings, that means that oftentimes folks get isolated, and that can actually intensify those feelings of anxiety because they are isolated. Leaning on your community and seeking therapy or professional help, they're not signs of weakness. They're not. Leaning on your community and seeking out therapeutic advice, wise people do that. That's wisdom in action. Because truly, we're not meant to live this life alone. And you don't have to go on this journey alone. There are people in your circle who love you and they want to be there to support you. They're not judging you. There are people there who want to hold you up in prayer, who want to be there with you as you go on this journey. Right? They want to help you face the barriers that sometimes that you might be facing in this season. And so let's talk about what some of the emotional and spiritual barriers may be that are keeping us silent and keeping us from asking for help when we need it. One of the biggest ones is shame. I know, right? We're embarrassed. We don't want anybody to know that we're struggling. Sometimes folks believe that their anxiety is a reflection of weak faith or poor spiritual discipline, right? Because if you're anxious, that means you don't trust God. If you're anxious, then that means you're not praying enough, you're not fasting enough. You're not going to church enough. Some people believe that they're anxious because of something that they're not doing enough of. Right? And that's just simply not true. It's not. And having these types of thoughts are actually harmful because they prevent you from being able to heal. Right? So we have to be careful of the ways that we speak to ourselves because we believe everything we tell ourselves, right? We believe everything we tell ourselves. But anxiety is not a sin. It's not. When we're anxious about something, that's actually a signal. That's our brains telling us it's a sign that something in our body, our mind, or our spirit needs our attention. It means that something needs care. And that's okay. Sometimes anxiety is a good thing because it's a warning signal, right? That's telling us, hey, I need you to pay attention. There's something going on. There's something that's not quite right. God is amazing in that way, right? That he equipped us with these internal tools to tell us when something's not quite right. So how does anxiety show up in our real lives? What does anxiety look like in real life? Because it can show up mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It can show up in all of those ways. In our emotions, it might show up as withdrawing. We pull away from our loved ones. On the other hand, it might mean that we're more clingy. We want to be close to someone all the time. Sometimes that looks like we get easily overwhelmed, and things that don't normally frustrate us. And sometimes it looks like negative narratives. We have this negative thought in our head and it just plays over and over and over again on a loop, right? Sometimes it shows up in our physical bodies. Sometimes that looks like an increased heart rate. Sometimes it can show up as being short of breath, an upset stomach. And an upset stomach could be, anything from nausea and vomiting, diarrhea. Sometimes it looks like sweating. Yeah. For folks who are public speakers, what does that look like sometimes when you have to get up on the stage? You just get drenched in sweat for a moment before you get up there. Sometimes it looks like muscle tension. Your neck and shoulders are killing you because they're so tight, because you're so nervous and you're anxious and you're all bunched up in a ball. And then spiritually, sometimes that looks like you have a hard time praying. You don't have any idea where to start. Sometimes that looks like you just don't have it in you to worship. You have worship fatigue. I don't have a song to sing. I don't have a praise to give. Sometimes that looks like pulling away from your community, from your church family. Sometimes that looks like taking a step back. Right? And so the reality is anxiety isn't just a feeling, it's a full body experience. Mind, body, and spirit are affected. And this is what I want everyone to know. This doesn't mean that you're being rebellious in some way when you have a hard time praying, or you're having a difficult time worshiping, or, spending time with your church family. That's not rebellion. Sometimes it's literal exhaustion. And God knows. He knows that. He knows where you are, when you are. He knows all things about us. So he knows. But sometimes it helps when we can go to him. When we can talk to the Father about what we're going through. Right? In the scriptures, we can find comfort and perspective. Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ." Think on what is true, noble, right. And here's the thing. It's important that we understand that these scriptures are not meant to shame us or to silence our anxieties. That's not what it's about. These scriptures are invitations. They're invitations to come to the Father. Be anxious for nothing isn't a command to suppress our emotions. It's a reminder that God meets us in our anxiety right where we are, and that in him we can find peace that passes all understanding. So this isn't a command. It's an invitation. Because the Father loves us. So he's not trying to pressure us into this peace with him, but he offers it as a grounding place, a place to help us settle. That's what we can find with the Father. And in therapy, we can learn grounding tools, right? And so, grounding tools are things like mindfulness. When we're mindful, it helps us to slow our racing thoughts, just to stop and be in the moment. It helps to slow down. When we use tools like breath work, it helps us to regulate our nervous system. And I can't stress how important it is to sometimes just be able to find a quiet space, to be able to silence some of the noise so that we can reduce that cognitive overload, that overwhelm sometimes that we get when there's so much noise and so much activity around us. Just getting in a quiet space with the Father can help with anxiety. Exercises and sensory grounding can help bring our bodies back into the present moment. And then naming what's true. Being able to identify when we're telling ourselves, with these negative narratives, when we're repeating these negative narratives, and we can tell ourselves that is not true. And then we can say what is true. Because when we're able to name what's true, we're able to interrupt catastrophic thinking. We're able to interrupt that journey into the dark place that we go to sometimes when we're anxious. We're able to do that. And then therapy also plays a powerful role in navigating anxiety. Because therapy provides us with a safe space to process the issues of the heart. It's safe to say how you really feel. It's safe to say what you really think. Therapy helps us to identify patterns and triggers and emotional cycles. It equips people with the tools to manage what we can control and to let go of the things that we can't. Because how many of us get anxious because we think that we're supposed to have it all under control all the time, and some of these things we try to control, we can't. Because really the only controllable factor is ourselves, right? You can't necessarily control what happens. You can only control your response to it. And a faith integrated counselor can also help connect scripture to the healing journey in a healthy and non-shaming way. And that's also something that's important. To be able to get and receive scriptural foundation that's healthy and non-shaming. So that you can be progressive in your healing journey. Right? And so let's talk about emotional cycling and why anxiety feels so unpredictable. And so emotional cycling is that high and low days that we have. One moment we feel really, really good, and then one moment we don't. Right? And sometimes these emotions come in waves. Right? Sometimes they're waves that we don't even see coming. It's just like 1 minute I'm fine and one moment I'm not. And this is normal. It's normal to have these emotional cycles when we're going through transition seasons. And it's because our nervous system is adjusting to the change. It's adjusting to being uncertainty. It's having to adjust to experiencing loss. Because sometimes these are not things that we wanted or were able to prepare for. They just happen. And so we have these waves of highs and lows. Moments of calm followed by moments of overwhelm or what feels like chaos. And you're not regressing in your journey because you're having these highs and lows. It's actually a part of the process. It's a part of the process. We're going to have highs and lows, but keep going. Keep moving forward. And so as we get ready to close, I would like to invite you to choose a grounding tool to practice consistently. Right? And that could be mindfulness, practicing breath work, being intentional about getting in a quiet space, naming what's true. And that's a big one, isn't it? Because sometimes when we're anxious and we're going through these seasons of loss and transition, all we can see is the bad. All we can see is darkness. And there may be times when, you tell yourself it's never going to get any better. And that's when sometimes we have to remind ourselves of God's faithfulness. And we have to go into our thankful jar and we have to pull out that time when we thought it was never going to get better. And it did. And so then we can remind ourselves that it won't always be like this. Because I remember 2 years ago when XYZ happened. It was hard. It wasn't what I wanted. My heart was broken. I thought I would never smile again. But here I am. I'm still standing. I'm smiling. And sometimes I'm smiling through tears, but I'm smiling. And so you can do it. I want you to remind yourself that you're not broken. You are very much human, and God is with you in every phase of this transition. He's not forgotten about you. He loves you. This healing journey is not a linear process. It's not. It happens in phases, And as with transition or loss, we go through that grief cycle, right? And we cycle in and out of the different stages. But in every phase, God is present and He is with you. And He is steady even when our emotions are not. And we know His character. So be reminded, God is with you and He will never leave you nor forsake you on this journey. He is right there. And so until next time, keep choosing healing. Keep choosing joy. I love y'all. Bye.